Welcome to OmniFocus Workflows with Robby Burns, and it's really great to have Robby here today. And thanks to all of you who are joining from various parts of the world. We have quite a few teachers and musicians in our session today, so I look forward to all the great questions and sharing you'll have. If you're new to Learn OmniFocus, thanks very much for being a part of this. Thanks for watching this recording today if you're watching the recorded version. This is a site I started 6.5 years ago, and it's going stronger than ever today. We have a great international community with people in over 85 countries that have joined. So it's really exciting to see this continue to grow. The goal of Learn OmniFocus is not just to teach OmniFocus, it's really to provide productivity guidance, and OmniFocus is what's at the center of this constellation of apps. But we also get into general productivity methodology, talk a lot about GTD, my own holistic productivity approach, and then we get into a variety of other apps that are complementary to OmniFocus. So what this session is part of the Learn OmniFocus live series. So to give you a little taste of what that looks like, we cover certain productivity theories and themes. So we've done ones recently on like managing someday maybe lists, on managing large projects, on mastering reviews. So there's a growing number of sessions that are based on these specific themes, and these are provided as courses. So if you're watching a recording, you can watch that in a course format. There's also featured apps. So we realize that OmniFocus doesn't exist in a bubble. You really rely on other productivity apps to be productive, including your calendar. You might be using apps like DevonThink and Evernote. And so there's a whole sort of system of apps that supports productivity overall. So we've been featuring quite a few apps recently, and there's definitely more to come. We have workflow guests, just like we're having Robby sharing his wisdom today. So really excited to hear what he has to say. If you go onto the Learn OmniFocus site, there's also a whole collection of past workflow guests, people like Kurashtini and David Sparks, and there's a lot of really rich wisdom in what all of these people have shared. And then lastly, one of my favorite parts of Learn OmniFocus is getting to meet people and hang out and exchange ideas and answer questions in the small group office hours. So these are currently held a few times a month in varying times, varying days of the week, hopefully to accommodate as many people as possible. They aren't recorded, unlike the other ones, and this is an opportunity to meet other people from the community and get some OmniFocus related questions answered. So if you haven't been to one of these, definitely recommend checking that out. And just a little taste of what's coming soon. So I've been doing a series of using OmniFocus with, insert app name here. And we've covered a couple of apps so far. As I mentioned, Asana is one that I've recently covered, and that's available in a course format, as well as Kurashtini sharing about DevonThink, and using that alongside OmniFocus. And you'll find that on learnomnifocus.com as well. And these are the ones that I'm currently working on. I've got Drafts, Evernote, MindNode, Notion, OmniPlan, and Trello, and I'm sure I'll be adding more to this list. So these might be apps that you already use, or maybe they're ones you're a little curious about or trying to decide if this is worth adding into your system, and you want to get a taste of what this app does, why people use it, why it's popular, and just see if it's a good fit for you. So whether you're a veteran user of these apps or just kind of curious about it, definitely recommend checking that out. The next one I'm going to feature is one of my favorite productivity apps. It's the mind mapping app MindNode. And anytime I have some thinking to do, whether it's about where to go on the next trip or which sort of session to do next, or even planning a session, MindNode is really where all the work begins. It's where I kind of get all these random ideas and bring some form and structure to them, and then these can be transformed into OmniFocus actions and projects. So it's a really beautiful complement to OmniFocus on the planning side of things. And that session will be on November 5th, which is a Thursday, from 10 to 11 Pacific Standard Time. So I hope to see you here for the live session, and if not, I will be making a recording available as well. And there's 3 office hours sessions scheduled for October. There's one on the 13th, the 21st, and the 28th, and there's currently space available in all 3 of those. There'll be more coming in November, and I'll be announcing those dates very soon as well. All right, and without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Robby Burns. And he's joining us from Ellicott City, Maryland. And if you're not quite sure where that is, it's a suburb of Baltimore. And really, really great to have Robby here today. We've had some great talks on OmniFocus and technology in general. He's just a very bright, interesting, creative fellow, and I'm really happy to have him on the show. So to give you a little taste of Robby's current pursuits, so he's got an active blog at Music Ed Tech Talk, it's called. And even if you're not into music or education, I definitely recommend checking this out. He's still got a lot of really interesting technical articles that I think will be of interest to most people. He's actually got a podcast as well by the same name, Music Ed Tech TED Talk. And he's written a book, especially if you are a music teacher, definitely recommend checking this one out. It's called Digital Organization Tips for Music Teachers. And I'm sure any music teachers who are joining us today know that there's a lot to keep track of, I think for any teacher as well, but maybe even more so if you're a music teacher and managing bands and instrumental groups and so forth. You can learn about all of these and other things at robbyburns.com, and recommend checking that out. And you can follow Robby on Twitter. It's at Robby Burns. All right, so it's my pleasure to hand it over to you, Robby, and take it away.
As someone who thinks digitally in the way that I do all of my work, for me, I get an excitement when it comes to creative professional software, composing, producing music, anything that's going to help me to be a better teacher. But at the center of that is productivity software that helps me to get those things done, that doesn't particularly help me to get it done because of the career that I've chosen, but that continues to be at the center of everything I do. And regardless of how much music or teaching is a part of your life, I think maybe some of these things we're going to talk about today will hopefully be helpful or at least thought-provoking to you. So I kind of want to start a little bit with some of my musical beliefs, because they sort of inform my beliefs about focus and getting things done. We all know that attention and time are finite. The problem for me is that I am what if you're into following the Enneagram at all, which is like this idea that there are sort of 9 vantage points or ways of viewing the world. I am what's called the number 7, which is the enthusiast, which means that I am not satisfied until I have acquired more experiences in life, more relationships, more career opportunities, more music, more food, more everything. So we are 7s are sort of gluttonous for lots of things in life. I think of that in relationship to my career with just a lot of different sort of avenues that are adjacent to one another, but that are in some ways slightly different. So my main bread and butter, so to speak, is I am middle school band director. I teach band and general music at a school in Ellicott City. And music teaching, this was mentioned at the subject of my book, music teaching itself is a really multifaceted career. Even if you teach at the middle school level, you have to be a master musician. You have to be great at teaching. You have to be a financial planner, a field trip planner, sometimes a composer and an arranger. You have to be a conductor. You have to be someone who interprets musical scores. You have to be all of these different things, even in that one job. And then somewhere along the line, I got really interested in making freelance performing a big part of my career. And then in more recent years, maybe like the past 6 or 7 years, I've been doing a lot of things with technology, which has sort of led me down the path of my book and my blog and my podcast and presenting at a national level about that. And a lot of times that is about specifically musical topics or educational topics. But what's exciting about today to me is I get to talk about productivity, which is, if you can imagine, not something always that if you're presenting at the Maryland Music Educators Association, not everyone wants to talk about OmniFocus perspectives. So this is awesome that this can happen today. So to me, OmniFocus, before I show my screen, OmniFocus is something that to me is designed to help me to do exactly that, to focus. And because I've got this impulse to explore lots of different creative passions in my life, it's important to wrangle those all together. What I think I'm really good at is bouncing between these different things really rapidly. But what I think often is some people maybe perceive that I can do, or that is possible to do as a person, is to do something called multitasking. And I don't want to say I don't believe in multitasking, but I don't necessarily believe it is what we say it is. To me, what I do is I have lots of singular areas of focus that I'm really, really good at bouncing back and forth between really quickly because of a need to do that and also stay engaged with those pursuits. But real multitasking to me is the ability to actually live and breathe through two different strands of thought at the same time with your brain. And there are very few instances of this that I see, but some of them are musical. I think of a pianist named Glenn Gould, who's known for playing the music of Bach. He especially is known for a couple of recordings of the Goldberg variations. And the music of Bach there's often 2 or 3 different voice parts, each of which is a beautiful melody happening, but composed in a way that simultaneously sound really, really good, better together at the same time. And Glenn Gould was someone who could, I believe, put all of his heart and emotion and mind into each one. Like if he was playing 3 melodies at the same time, I believe he could put all of his feeling into each of those melodies as if he were putting all of his mental energy into just one of them, but simultaneously. That to me is multitasking. And that's not something that I really feel like I've mastered as a person. So it's super important to me that as someone who's only in little brief moments of my life have I really achieved a level where I felt like I was putting my entire energy, brain, and heart and soul into more than one thing at a time. It's important to have software that can help me to just continue to do what I was saying before, which is just bounce back and forth between them really quickly. And so for people like me, there's OmniFocus. And I'm going to walk you through my workflow with this software. I came to productivity software probably about 10 or so years ago. And I actually, my first exposure to this kind of Mac GTD software was I was in the Apple store after getting my first MacBook. And this was in 2006. So maybe a little longer I've been using GTD software. I bought an app called Things. It was in a box on a shelf in the Apple store. And I took that home and I fell in love with some of the things that it could do. I had never read Getting Things Done. Over the course of using it for about a year, I learned about some of the adjacent software that was out there. I learned about OmniFocus, toyed around with it a little bit, used it off and on. And then eventually, around the time that I think iOS 7 came out, I switched to it full time. And the rest is history. I do still periodically look around to some other apps just to kind of learn what's going on and reflect on my process a little bit. Yeah, so OmniFocus is for focusing me on only what is relevant in a given moment or context. What I love is that my busy band directing lifestyle is super active. I'm on my feet all the time. This concept of like having these like long stretches of review where I'm thinking and reflecting, I don't always get those in a typical workday. I'm lucky if I can even sit down in a typical workday, but I'm constantly adding things to my plate. A student says, my read is broken. This part of your website, like I clicked on this piece of sheet music and the link was broken. Tons of things are just kind of coming up throughout the day. And so the main attractive feature to me of OmniFocus is, and any of these kinds of applications, is this quick shortcut inbox. And the ability to type in a keyboard shortcut and just have something like I can be playing a video game on my screen and remember that I need milk the next day. And just for me, it's control spacebar. Just have that option there to just enter that and then not be disrupted with what I'm doing was a revelation to me. The ability to get that kind of stuff out of sight, out of mind. And then what I've sort of done with that is, at first in my early days using programs like Things that are a little bit more focused on the sort of the context of when things are done is a little bit more by due date or today date. I've over the course of the past years reflected on my process and learned how to make things sort of a little bit more, some things are more project focused, some things are more tag focused, some things are more date focused. And then in very, very recent months, as my teaching profession has moved to an online model, I've been able to reflect on how perspectives can really help me there. So I'm going to go ahead into my inbox And I left it purposefully a little messy for you all so that, I want to keep things honest here. I'm not really a perfect user of any program. A lot of things end up in here that really don't belong in here. Some things end up in here that need to be cleaned up quite a bit. Like, for example, this task. This is an email I forwarded in here that a student of mine is interested in auditioning for the all-state band, and I need to research some information about that. So research all-state band. So typically my process for the inbox is, as many times a day as I can get in here, I try to get in here and clean things up a little bit. The nature of the band teaching job, especially, is easy to. There are some longer term projects that have a clear beginning and middle and end, but there's a real big need in my life for single item action lists. So I've got one called Ellicott Mills Middle School, that's where I work, miscellaneous, and it's really easy to get that in there. This is going to involve me being on the web, so I have a little tag for that. And so this is a fun kind of point of interest for me here is the defer date in OmniFocus. And I use these because of my strong history learning GTD software using the app things. Some features of that model have really stuck with me that have been really difficult to shake because they work well for my brain. One of those is that there's kind of a notion of a today list. And the today list is sort of like the list of ambitions for the day. Here's all the tasks that I would like to be working on today. Because I like to get things into the inbox quickly and then not think about them again until the time that they're relevant to me, I am pretty rigorous about defer dates, and I am not afraid to give myself too many of them. And I do treat them like, when does the task become available to me? But I also treat them a little bit like a today list, in that once something becomes available to me, I really, it's not just that I could be working on it, like I really do want to be thinking about that and working on that. And this deadline is soon. I'm not 100% sure it's, but I know I need to start looking at this on Sunday. So I'm going to type in Sunday. I probably should give this a due date. I'm not going to right now for purposes of getting through this list. So you can see I've dumped a lot of email in here. I've started to even sort of like, this is going to become a project. I was in a meeting and I just, because I'm teaching online right now, I'm in front of a computer so much more than ever before. So, I was in a meeting the other day, and where I would typically take out drafts on my phone to be a little quicker, I just started kind of creating a task list and some subtasks right in the inbox, just because of the little bit of extra time there was. So I've got some stuff that doesn't belong in here. Like, this is something I want to check out on. We're going to talk later. Stuff like this sometimes does just make it into OmniFocus because it's sometimes the quickest way to get something to be committed to my future self. But generally, I'm moving more of these like, hey, check out this website, check out this thing, check out that thing. I'm moving a lot more of that to DevonThink because I'm finding more often than not, it does not require action. So it's a little bit of my inbox procedure. I've got some projects, and I keep these all sorted here. I use a light foldering system because, in my opinion, OmniFocus does not. It still requires a little bit of tapping around to get into projects and tasks that are nested too deeply in folders. So I will create sometimes one top level folder if I feel like I've got a lot of projects that are really closely associated. I'm going to spend a little bit of time. I guess I can talk about my miscellaneous list. This is sometimes when I just want to get something out of my way until a certain date. I won't be too picky about giving it a project. The downside of this is that it can get a little bit heavy. The list can be really difficult and unmotivating to review. So I'll show you in a little bit how I've been using a particular tag to help myself minimize how long it takes me to review this miscellaneous project. So I've got some things in here. Over the years, I've learned to break down things. Anything that's more than 2 or 3 tasks, I will generally try to give a project and leave it at this root level without a folder, just so that I can get to it more easily. I'm currently putting together a course for the Maryland State Department of Education. It's on how to make a virtual ensemble where you're like knitting together asynchronous video of student performances into one final performance of a piece of music. I got a little project for this here today. And then here's my Howard County Public School System folder, which has some different projects in it. And like I said, I have quite a few of these single item action lists. Like I have one for each of the classes that I'm currently teaching, and those are not really going to end. I usually just sort of leave those as open-ended action item lists, and things sort of go in and out of them as time progresses. This would be an example of something that is, I'm going to go ahead and make this, show you all, because I've actually done this project. This would be an example of a project that's a little bit more linear for me. At the end of last school year, I was making some of these virtual band videos, and there were just a lot of steps. I had to like organize files on my computer. I had to migrate things into Logic Pro. I had to make sure I had communicated with everyone to see if my students were on the no photo list or not, so I could find out if I was able to publish the final product to YouTube publicly, or if it needed to just be a private link for the community. Everything from like kind of my order of like how I edit things. So like at one point I needed to align the parts rhythmically, fix any noise in any of the parts, because these students are performing in their bedrooms with usually microphones, balancing, listen in sections and in registers of instruments, fix tone and intonation to the best of my ability. So I kind of have this sequenced list that was important for me to go through in order. But I think you're getting the idea that that's a little bit more rare for me. However rare that it is one of the reasons that I feel completely drawn to and committed to OmniFocus, because when I do have a project that has a beginning and an end and numerous multiple moving parts, it's really important that I have OmniFocus. There's a couple things that sometimes get in my way, but ultimately help me. The fact that things turn like really red, or in this case orange, when they're due, that's really helpful to me. Now if I use another task app, I forget stuff because the due dates are just not as assertive in any other program. So the other thing is when when I'm making these more linear projects, I am able to use templates, which we'll talk about in a moment. And I absolutely am not a master of the logistics of the job. I am held together by duct tape and string. Sometimes it feels. And when you're, like an artist and you come in and want to do music with kids and have a great time and make an engaging experience, some people are really, really good at also planning field trips, and I'm not one of them. So I'll show you this when we talk about drafts. I'll show you, I have a very, very, very carefully made template for a couple of my repeat projects that really make sure that I do not miss any steps. This will be another example of something that I did recently. So I've got, I made a product for my website recently, some scale exercise play along tracks, and I'm just working with a more linear approach. So yeah, I guess we might as well move on to tags. So tags are something that I really, really wanted for a long time, and now that we have them, I'm exploring all sorts of avenues of how these can be useful to me. I'm a recent emoji convert to tags, and they help me to see things and grab onto things with a little bit more. Things are more interesting, so I can visually find them on the page a little bit quicker. I've got some basics, things that are phone calls. I love the avoiding tag, things that I'm avoiding. I'll tag them and then sometimes just try to filter out all the things except for the things I'm avoiding, and get, like, if I can get one thing I'm avoiding done a day, that's usually a productive day. And usually when I do that, I immediately do like 9 other tasks that were easier. Something about doing the task I was avoiding, it's like working out first thing in the morning or something like that. It just like kind of like breaks the seal and allows you to get things done. This is my engaging tag I was telling you about earlier. So if I have something that is just exciting and fun that I want to do, something I know that I'm going to want to sink my mental energy into, like I get home from a long day of work and I know that I'm just going to kind of decompress for a few minutes. Engaging to me, it could be interpreted to mean like it's going to require a lot of mental engagement, but what it means to me is that my brain is going to naturally kind of try to use it as an escape for actual work. So these are the kinds of things like the other day, my HomeKit garage door opener was broken, and that makes me go crazy. So I was like, I really just want to fix this so that it works, and I am motivated to do that. So I also don't need to review that in my miscellaneous list. So anything that's like like checking out an app that I really want to write about on my blog, or doing a blog post, or tweaking around on my home screen or something, things that are like just extra mental clutter that comes to my brain that ends up in my inbox, but I do not want to have to review it. I tag that engaging, and then I actually put it in a special project that gets reviewed like once every 6 months. So actually longer than that now, I think. In other words, I don't review it really ever. It's just a way to get some extra stuff in here. I've got tags for energy, for priority, things that are housework. I use a couple of location-based tags. I've got one for when I arrive at work and when I leave. I've got things for devices, and I'm just applying these a little bit more often lately because they make it easy to build perspectives and search for things. I've got tags for people. I've got tags for, I've got a tag that I love called photocopier. If I have a minute or two of free planning time and I need to photocopy some parts, but also I told the orchestra director I would photocopy a letter he's sending home to his students. I can tag all of those things so that when I know I'm walking down to the photocopier, I can just filter all of my photocopy tasks and know that I can get them done there. So it doesn't seem like walking down the hallway should really require a contextual tag, but I get held up and people want to talk to me, and like I eat brownies in the staff lounge and stuff. So we want to try to minimize those trips if you're me. So that's a little bit of tagging. I spend most of my time in the forecast. Like I said, I'm really a very time-focused kind of person. I want to think about things in terms of when I'm looking at them. As you can see, I have these are all not going to actually get done today. And again, this is just how I like to use the application. I like, once things are available to me, for the most part, I like to be thinking about them and aware that they could be happening. And this is a challenge, another unique challenge to teaching in the public school system. Maybe you can relate if you have experience in education. We never get everything done on our to-do list that is supposed to happen in the day. Like it never happens. And I really mean that. Like things that I think you like that have to get done sometimes don't get done in a day. So I leave work every day when I have to because I'm going home to teach some private lessons, or because I decide that for my own mental health I'm gonna not stay at school till 5 p.m. I know that's ending of the workday for some. That we start pretty early in the morning. So I'm really comfortable telling myself that I can be thinking about and working on things and then just leaving the list for the next day. Because that's the case, I was noticing that I was doing a lot of this kind of thing. Maybe you can relate, like these little +1 buttons down here. These were driving me crazy. So, and actually it's only until very recently that I finally found a solution to this using the Omni automation. A very kind fellow on the user forums helped me create this. And when I say helped me, I mean he like just wrote it for me. So I've got an automation now, and it's called Snooze Deferred. And it might as well be called Act Like the Things Today List, because like, I think you're noticing a theme. I really liked that today list. The short of it is that I wanted, when tomorrow comes, I wanted anything that was like deferred to the previous day. I didn't want to have to manually tag it today to keep it on the today view. I just wanted, once something becomes available to me, just be on my today list. Just don't leave my today list unless I defer it out beyond the current day, in which case, please remove it from my today list. So what the snooze deferred automation does, it's mapped to Command D. And when I press Command D, it's almost as, now I'm used to it as much as Command K for cleanup. It's like it's just a natural thing that I do kind of impulsively. It takes anything that has been deferred out and takes it off the forecast by stripping it of its today tag. And anything that happened in a previous day that was on like yesterday's deferred list or beforehand gets the today tag added. So it's sort of aggregating everything that I could potentially be working on to one list. And then I'm pretty, I'm not afraid to just like, if at the end of the day is happening and I just want to like select all of these and then defer it to tomorrow and then hit Command D, then that just kind of cleans things up a little bit, and that's fine. It's like snoozing email. Everyone has different opinions about it, but for me, this is absolutely what's keeping me sane. So because this is how my job as a teacher has, kind of forced me to think about using OmniFocus is having a lot of things on my plate. Obviously, they're not all as important as one another. So I have some ways of sort of filtering even this list into different varying degrees of importance. And one of them is my priority list. My priority list is not very interesting right now. It's just got some flagged items. But what this particular list does is it says anything that's due or due soon, show here. And then anything that's tagged today and also flagged, also show that here. So if I've got a pretty loose and open today list in the forecast because I've tagged, like I made a million things deferred, and I really just have only really 4 or 5 that are coming up that are really important to me, and those are flagged. My priority list is like, you have only 20 minutes of planning time today, a very, very serious reality in the public school system. You've got 20 minutes of planning. You better not look at any of that other stuff. Like, these are the things that you have to get done. A little different with an online teaching model where I'm in front of my computer all day, but that's one of the ways that helps. And then I've got an even more serious, we'll call it, it's a perspective. So it's called top 3. I have no idea why this is in there. This is like a 3-month-old task that I've done, but I'll leave it in there just to kind of show you the whole point of it. So there are days where I get so stressed by the mechanics of even having a digital to-do app. Like, anything that's in a computer is just too much. I've got 2 or 3 very high-level things that need to get done. They're not always even action-oriented tasks with a verb in front. They're just 3 top-level things. There's no time to like really think about what are this individual subtasks. I just know that all of a sudden someone came into my office, and all of a sudden my code band director and I have to finish our rosters for the next school year by tomorrow, or else we're going to run into scheduling issues. So what I do is I'll typically take out a sticky note and I'll write 3 things on it. Or for a while I was using this fun website that was like just 3 things. I think it was, maybe someone here can remember it. It was called just3things.com maybe, or I don't know. All it was like a silly website where there was a 1, a 2, and a 3 with a dot, and then you could just type in 3 things and just I would just minimize the window to the upper left corner. And that was my silly way of saying like, all right, I need to be like not in my task manager today, just focus on these things. So I figured, why not turn that into a perspective in OmniFocus? Created a 1, a 2, and a 3 tag. I tag them that, and then this perspective only shows me things tagged 1, 2, and 3. They don't really need to have 1, 2, and 3. I could have just made them all 3 as the tag, but having a 1, 2, and a 3 sort of helps me with prioritizing what they are. If I were a little bit more savvy with perspectives, I think I'm not sure if I can get them to actually, the perspective to order them 1, 2, 3, unless the numbered tag is the first tag that the item has. Maybe someone can correct me on that, because it would be cool if I could have my item that's tagged 1 actually be the first one on the list. But anyway, this is like hyper survival mode, just top 3. That's how that works. So because I love that today tag, I've also got a today perspective that's organized by project. And I have a deferred thing. This is great because I'm so liberal with the deferred items. It's really nice to just be able to go back and see, okay, like, wow, look at this. Like, I've got a lot of things that are just hanging out here. Do I really need to do all these? Maybe some of these need to be dropped. Maybe I need to be rethinking my commitments, or maybe I just need to suck it up and pay my water and sewer bill. That's apparently been sitting there in the last month. I hope I have water later today. So this is kind of a good way to just be honest with myself because of the way that I've structured my process. And then I have the completed list. You know what that is. That's the one that comes baked into OmniFocus. And then I've got these 2. Now, teaching is pretty easy. It's just all of my projects that are involved with the Howard County Public School System, which includes Ellicott Mills Middle School, but I also co-direct the Middle School Honor Band here in Howard County Public Schools. So anything that relates to me and my involvement with Howard County gets put here. We'll talk about my emergency subplans in a little bit when we get into DevonThink. This is another example. I use my grades perspective in a really similar kind of way that I do that engagement tag. Sometimes students will run into issues submitting work online. This is a real big issue for teachers right now. My attitude, my method of operation is for students to I want them to be able to turn in the work, whatever means necessary. I'm not trying to penalize my students for technical failures. So occasionally a student's supposed to submit a video somewhere, and then it will, that video will not upload correctly to our learning management software. So I'll have them email it to me. No big deal. The email goes into my OmniFocus inbox, and I don't really spend, I spend concentrated time inputting grades because our learning management system it runs in a web browser. It's Canvas. So, I have to wait a lot for tabs to load, and I have to click around a lot. So I generally will spend concentrated periods of time grading, but also there's no definitive deadline to when I have to input grades. Well, there is like at the end of the quarter, but like it doesn't really matter, that certain people have sent me videos, like I can grade that anytime. So I end up giving those some kind of miscellaneous project that gets reviewed less often, and then I just tag it with gradebook when I'm ready to be in my gradebook. I click grades, and then I work in Canvas. I was talking about project templates earlier, and the most recent time that I tried to use another to-do or task management application, this was really where I got hung up. It was the middle of the busiest time of the school year, and we do this thing every March called a band adjudication. It's where I take my band students to a performance. They perform alongside all of the other middle school bands in the county, and this is one of those field trips I was talking about with lots of moving parts. And I find that I just drop all of my tasks and cannot get it done without without these project templates. As some people kind of joke or argue that OmniFocus is a little more complex. I think the to-do list project templates are so much easier than any other alternative. Using the task paper format is an absolute breeze. So I'm in Drafts for the Mac, and this is where I store my OmniFocus templates. I have a workspace for them. This is the only way I am using Drafts where text stays there permanently. It's otherwise an inbox for me. In fact, while I'm talking about using the two together, I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of my OmniFocus tasks get into my inbox through Drafts these days, just because it's in a prime spot on my phone's home screen and takes no thinking. It loads really quickly. I can add things from my Apple Watch really easily. It's really good for that. So usually stuff that ends up in my Drafts inbox gets filtered into OmniFocus or a Notes app. So this is my templates project, or workspace rather, and I'm going to find I'll show you. Here's an example of the adjudication. So this is the to-do list for everything that happens, ranging from emailing parents home to ordering. So we have to submit a certain number of copies of the musical score to each judge who's adjudicating us. So I have to make sure that if I don't already have those in my library, that I order them a certain number of days before the actual event. My first year as a teacher, I called the representative from the local music store the night before our performance at 9 p.m. I remembered that I hadn't done this, and I still run into her from time to time. She doesn't ever let me forget it. That was a long time ago. So I have to order my scores from whoever that is. Music and Arts is where I do that. And you can see here that I've got that deferred 30 days before the date of the event. And then, so you can see here that this right here is actually, it's technically not due until one day before, because again, like, I really do not try to make items in OmniFocus due until you cannot survive the day without them. So while I would never do this to her again, that item is technically not due till the day before, because could I pick up the phone or an email and then print out an electronic copy and attach the letter that she writes to the front of it that says this score has been legally purchased for you? Yeah, I could do that. I'm not going to, but that's when that due date is. And the list goes on. Everything from ordering pizza and picking it up at Costco and reminding myself that they have to double slice because middle schoolers are small and that saves us money. How many pepperoni pizzas there are, it's all here with tags and relative due dates. And then I've borrowed Rosemary Orchard's OmniFocus task paper action list, which is it's a list of actions right here. It's also got some keyboard stuff that is a little more useful to me on iOS. And this is the one that I use the most. It's just the one that basically takes the text and then asks me some questions. So this is going to be, and we'll call it a new project, even though usually I put this in a folder. So the ensemble name might be the Wind Ensemble. And the performance date could be, we'll call it, it's not, but November 23rd. And now in OmniFocus, I've got all of those with relative due dates and deadlines all ready to go. I have this workspace set up so that actually I need to maybe tweak what just happened there, because the way that I at one point had this set up is by default, nothing happens. These don't get archived when I run an action on them. So they just permanently stay in the inbox of my OmniFocus templates workspace. So that's a little bit of that. I've sort of customized my, my keyboard a little bit so that on the iOS version, you can see I have both my inbox workspace and my OmniFocus workspace have a couple of these actions in them, so that if I'm doing something like, if I'm in my OmniFocus inbox, sometimes I'll, like, this is actually a great example of just some quick ideas I was jotting down for next week's online lessons for my students. Some of these will need to be done by certain days. Obviously next week, that's a little loose. So, you know, plan for week 5 of online learning. And then what I can do is, because of Rosemary's awesome keyboard stuff, I've got, you know, like that really quickly adds the do tag so that when I parse this using the task paper to OmniFocus, it'll, you know, make that particular project due tomorrow. Generally, I usually use these on the actual rows of tasks as well. And then I would make these more actionable verbs, kind of break it out. This is what I'm going to do later today. So, so yeah, I've got some of her actions running in both my OmniFocus workspace, but also my favorites space, which is here. Shortcuts is another automation tool that I'm using quite a bit, but I'm not using it in a particularly advanced way. It's just that the couple of small ways I use it are really simple, but I depend on them. Tim, you might laugh. I've changed my home screen even since yesterday when we spoke. So it's a problem for me. All right, so let's go to shortcuts. And this is an example of something when I do an episode of my podcast, I run this shortcut. And it prompts me to do a couple things. Who's the guest? Who's sponsoring the episode? When are we recording? When will the episode be? Has a template for show notes that I'll post on my blog once the episode is published that goes into drafts. And then a task paper text field that uses the due dates and deadlines I give it, along with the guest name and some other details that it prompts me for. And then adds that project to the Music Ed Tech Talk project in inside of OmniFocus. So it kind of, because it's a project inside of a project, it's sort of like produce the episode as the top level task, and then all the other tasks are subtasks with their individual defer and due dates. And then a little automated email that goes to the guest. And I save this, my notes that I read off of, and also that I share with each guest. If they are an Apple Notes user, that's also a template. So all of this data that I'm prompted for at the beginning of the shortcut is becoming both a template for the notes, the eventual blog post, and the OmniFocus tasks through use of some very, very simple variables.
Would it be possible to run this shortcut just to see it in action?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So a guest that is coming on my show soon is Dr. Frank Buck. He is a productivity expert that I met at the Texas Music Educators Association conference a few years back. He's been on my show before. He is doing a lot of this kind of stuff, but using Android, Windows, and more web apps. He's into Asana and Evernote and the Google ecosystem, so he's going to make a great complement to my more Apple and native application kind of centric focus. And I'm doing a 2-part series called Productivity Bootcamp. So Frank Buck is his name, who is sponsoring the episode. That's going to be flat for, actually, this is great because I needed to do this. So thank you for, for prompting me. When are we recording? Next Wednesday. And then which episode will this be? 18. So now I have the project, the note that I'll share, and then the email. I'm not going to actually send that right now. So if I head over to OmniFocus now, which is, for reasons I will not get into, buried in a folder, this is now a subtask at the bottom here that you can see. I recently took out the due dates and the defer dates for, because I'm sort of tweaking it a little bit, but usually they're there, just the same as my other one. So usually, like, I publish every other weekend. So the top level task will be, it'll be the date that I publish, and then some of the other ones will have defer dates that start a few days later. Like, generally, I need to start editing the show at least 2 days before I publish, so the defer date will be the variable that I had set for the due date, but then subtracting 2 days from that.
Okay, well, thanks for showing that in action, Robby, and this really points to, maybe looking at this, you might say this looks a little like a bit of work to set up, but then when you actually see it in action and see you can have this entire project created that's thought out and got all the proper dates and everything, literally within about maybe less than 30 seconds, that's where I think it becomes clear the sort of where the investment pays off, especially if you're doing this sort of thing over and over again, not just for doing it quickly, but also making sure you're not missing any steps and you're being consistent and not having sort of last minute things to deal with that could have easily been avoided. Just while we're on the iPhone, before we leave that, I'm really curious if you're willing to show that Charty widget you have on there. Yeah. Couldn't help but notice that. So even though there aren't any sort of iOS 14 widgets for OmniFocus yet, I know they're being worked on feverishly at the moment, so we should see those very soon. But this is an example of how you can actually draw information from OmniFocus and using an app other than OmniFocus.
I wish I were a little more qualified to talk about Charty. I have kind of knitted together a couple of things I've stolen. Charty is an application that can you can string it together with a bunch of other apps by having a shortcuts action that can look for data inside of other apps that are able to donate shortcuts actions themselves. And then what Charty does is it's not really an app that actually has any features or does anything. All it does is it becomes a step of a shortcut where it is taking data from other applications. And then, what it kind of does is you have these like different design templates for what the charts look like. So I didn't even make this shortcut at all. This is, hold on, let me find the actual shortcut in here. I believe this is OmniDay. This is this is Scotty J, right? Created this.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, Scotty Jackson. Yeah, I think he did a post on it recently too. If you want to learn more about it.
Yeah, and that is actually exactly where I took this idea from. So he basically made this shortcut that goes into OmniFocus and retrieves a bunch of different tasks and then charts them. So here's the Charty actions. Charts them as certain values in a bar graph on the axis of that chart, and then just uses some kind of fun, whimsical emoji to represent, in my case. So the leftmost is the little check mark emoji is things that I have done today, which is 5, yay, go me. 25 things on we have the forecast tag, that's what the star is. So again, my liberal use of that tag. 4 or 5 things flagged, nothing due anymore, fortunately. I have set this up so recently that I think that the little rocket ship is available tasks, but that seems like it's a low number for me. So I am going to have to research that. The only thing I did to edit this was I it said Omni Day instead of OmniFocus in the widget. So I went into the part of the shortcut that said Omni Day, that donated the title to the widget, and I changed it to OmniFocus because I liked that better. And then I took out each one of these little emoji images had like in text what it was. So like the check mark would say done after it, and the star would say forecast after it. So you can imagine that was too cluttered for this tiny little widget. So I just took out the text. And I think it looks pretty good. I think I'm gonna leave it there until we have something else.
Yeah, that's sharp. And I think it's all too easy to forget about what you've put into OmniFocus. I hear this from people all the time. Like I didn't even look at OmniFocus today because I was so busy answering emails or something like that. So I think having something that's reminding you of how you're doing and, what's left on your list, even if you're not in OmniFocus, can be really, really useful. So thanks.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. So this has been I think it's a beta bug, but you can see my legacy style OmniFocus widget is not currently loading. Oh, there it goes. Okay. I would love to be able to see OmniFocus right on the main page of my home screen where I tap on my most frequently used apps. But I think I'm going to leave this one here because these older style legacy widgets are really great for actionable productivity where you don't want to actually enter the app. So even though I'm using some water tracking and streaks and timery, I might experiment with some of those widgets on the home screen, but I think I also appreciate having them right here on this page where not only do I have some quick shortcuts that I can run at the top there, but whether my phone is locked or unlocked, I can always just swipe really quickly to get there. Now I can just as easily see that as, rather than being sort of a productivity zone where I'm pressing buttons and acting on apps, I could also see this as being what I think Apple designed it for, which is a view of your day. So whether maybe a big Fantastical widget and maybe an OmniFocus forecast. The OmniFocus widgets that were previewed on Twitter yesterday look really good. So I'm excited about trying those out soon.
Maybe we could just take a quick look at DevonThink, Robby. I'd be really curious to hear how that just overall fits into your system.
As complex as DevonThink is, it's real simple how I use it with OmniFocus. One of the things that I do often is I clip little images and emails and things to the notes field of an OmniFocus task. Sometimes I want to do that with a document, but I don't want to save the big document to my OmniFocus database, or I don't want a copy of the document. I want the link to actually take me straight to the source where I can begin editing. So here is DevonThink, and if I could briefly give you my feelings about DevonThink, it is, I think this is what is called an everything bucket. My inbox is a hot mess right now. This is all my, someone sends me a link to something I might blog about, or a link to an app, or I start reading something online and I want to read it later. YouTube videos. I think I'm pioneering this. You can tell me if you do this too. I'm saving TikToks to DevonThink. I don't know if that's exactly what they anticipated, but anything that's like remotely useful to my future self, I dump in here. I love that DevonThink does some of the Evernote kind of style stuff, like is really good at parsing text out of image files as well as documents and PDFs. So while I generally keep a lot of my creative work stored on my hard drive and various foldering systems in the Finder, I do find that there are times where something that's more of a reference style document will get put in here. So things like receipts, just like agendas from meetings, things that are, just kind of like, I don't really ever need to edit them. I'm just going to refer to them and use the robust text searching features of DevonThink in order to get to them. So that's kind of what I'm using DevonThink for. I honestly, I'm going to clean this up probably later today, but you can see here, this is another example of why I use it. This is, I'm preparing some of my private students for the Baltimore Youth Symphony Orchestra, and I love that a group can contain both websites, PDFs, and emails that I've dragged in from Outlook, all in the same group. That is something that I think DevonThink is useful for and unique in. So when I'm doing project-based stuff, a lot of times I will name groups in DevonThink after the same titles of projects in OmniFocus so that there's a little bit of connection in my mind between them. And then what I'll do is when I am ready to make something, a task out of something. Actually, let me do, I really need to do my subplans this weekend. I know I clipped in here some emergency subplans I used 2 years ago. So OmniFocus is baked right into DevonThink. I made a keyboard shortcut, Command O, out of it. And then it asks you when it's due. It's actually due a few days ago, but we'll say tomorrow. And now my OmniFocus task that is in my inbox will link me straight to this file in DevonThink, where I can refer to my older emergency plans and use them as a template for myself.
In general, I think having something like DevonThink is what keeps OmniFocus clean and relevant. And the nice thing about DevonThink is, and this example you just shared, Robby, is a perfect one, because long after a certain project or action is complete, you still have the information in DevonThink that you can draw upon in the future. Whereas it tends to be kind of tedious to go back and dig things out of OmniFocus, especially if it's been archived and the archive's sitting on your Mac and you're not at your Mac, those sorts of things. Request to share your snooze deferred script. And I think we might have found that on the discourse forum for the Omni Group.
Yep, that conversation is public.
Okay, cool. So I'll make sure I include a link to that. It's a question about what, I forget the exact question, but basically what prompted the switch from things. At what point did things not kind of fit the bill and you were motivated to go to OmniFocus?
Yeah, so I always had been interested in trying OmniFocus. I knew about all the power features that it offered. It definitely was, at the time, had a little bit of a learning curve. So every time I would dip my toes in, I would kind of go back to using things. And then I think anyone who's been following this might remember around the time that iOS 7 came out. It took the developers a little while to update their application to something that looked and felt like it belonged on the operating system. And I had noticed that the Omni Group was being really transparent about updating their software and what direction they were going with it. And I thought, well, I'll just try it. And then it was at this time that I kind of dug in a little bit more. I think I started reading more. I started reading more websites, blogs, listening to episodes of podcasts where people who had been like really power using it for a long time and figuring out what works, what doesn't. And like I said before, I mean, there are definitely things I appreciate a lot about other task apps. I love the collaboration in Todoist, and I really appreciate the not just how easy it is to collaborate, but how their sort of like web end to things enables it to be automated through other kinds of web services and applications. I think that's really useful. Like, for example, I can put my Todoist tasks on Fantastical. I actually have a shared project in Todoist with my the other band director at my school. So that's cool. Things I think is beautiful. And I just really like the design of it. I like the simplicity of the today list. But again, I tried to make some project templates in it the last time I tested it out, and I was lost. I was totally lost, and feeling like I was also dropping tasks and forgetting tasks because there was, that was it. That the reminder notification features were not quite as robust either.
I sometimes compare things to iMovie and OmniFocus to Final Cut Pro, and they're both very good apps in their own right. But there are cases where if you're trying to create your next feature film in iMovie, it might hit some walls, and that's where something like Final Cut Pro would really be beneficial. It might make it more efficient, even if it took a little bit longer to kind of get up to speed with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If you could talk a little bit more about drafts and sort of what necessitates using the Drafts app, why you would put things in there instead of going straight into OmniFocus. And that's a question I hear fairly often as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, there is a reason, and it's not a bad reason. It's just that, like, I obviously would put things directly in OmniFocus if I always could, but there are ways to get things into drafts that are a little easier. So yeah, I mean, the conflict is, of course, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday. The conflict is that if I'm going to send a Facebook message to Mark, and then these are going to eventually become a small project for me to complete tomorrow. And it's likely that over the course of the day, I mean, I cleaned this up before we got on the air here. So, I mean, not uncommon for there to be 6 to 8 or even 20 things in here at the end of the day, and for 90% of them to be tasks. So what I really would love for there to be in drafts is a button somewhere that would just batch send everything in my inbox to OmniFocus, because that is oftentimes the reality. So yeah, I mean, it is sort of like an inbox for my inbox, which is a little frustrating at times, but it's so easy to get things in drafts. I can add them from the Apple Watch app in one tap. I just tap the complication on my watch, and then it starts recording my voice. I have a little drafts keyboard shortcut, much like my OmniFocus shortcut, that brings up a little window in drafts. So yeah, I feel like that's part of it. Also, you know, sometimes I don't know when a thought is going to grow or develop. Sometimes a quick thought, like plan for week 5 of online learning, like you can see here, starts to develop a little bit more, and then I can spend some time fleshing out some of the details of that in drafts, and then use that task paper to OmniFocus once I've already added some defer dates and some due dates and tags to it.
I think really one of the areas where draft shines is it's essentially like a digital blank piece of paper where you can capture something without having to decide what to do with that thing. You might look at it later and just message it off to someone or email it, or it could go into DevonThink, or maybe it does become an OmniFocus action, but it's more of a general sort of capture inbox versus OmniFocus. I would tend to only capture things in there if they are actionable, if there's some action to be taken. But the nice thing about what you're sharing as well, Robby, is that you've got that level of refinement that happens in drafts. So just what you're showing on the screen right now, where you can think through it, decide what the task is there a due date and everything, and then send it off to OmniFocus in more of a defined way, instead of having something that's kind of undefined and sitting in your OmniFocus inbox.
It's nice to do that in drafts too, because you can see I've got like bad grammar in here and poor spelling and sentences that don't have really actionable verbs. Like, it's nice to be able to spend some time with it. You know, and as a byproduct of doing things like this and presenting my OmniFocus database, I am a little bit better about having stuff that's just for me be a little bit cleaner and more presentable for the most part. And that has actually, in a way, made me better at getting stuff done, because I've sort of taken this sort of, I mean, like, exactly, like, it's just, this is kind of like a digital scratch paper. But once I add some clear direction to myself and clean up the wording of this a little bit, that's going to be more meaningful to me in OmniFocus.
Yeah, it'll make OmniFocus more useful. And Matthew was pointing out there is a drafts action available where you can make each line of a draft its own task. I'm not aware of one offhand where you can actually take a bunch of actual drafts and have each of those become an action. So if you know of a quick and easy way of doing that, yeah, maybe you can type in the chat box, or let Robby or myself know.
Well, this top one here is called OmniFocus Inbox through Reminders, and it's actually, I'm not sure if I'm understanding exactly the question, but this will parse out each line.
Right.
So if I typed in, I don't know why get the milk is always my thing, but get milk, do the TPS reports. If I run that action, that'll go into 2 separate tasks in Apple Reminders, and then OmniFocus will pull them into its inbox.
Well, thank you so much, Robby, for joining us today and sharing all of your wisdom and your technical knowledge as well. And it's definitely given me some great food for thought. And thanks to everyone who joined here today for all the great questions and sharing. And I look forward to seeing you all soon, maybe at one of the Learn OmniFocus office hours. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye for now.